Oh, sure.
We're meeting Rich should back in the
Okay.
Stand corrected.
Yeah,
Ready? Let's go.
I got Tabby on it. Start recording. Are we recording, Tabby?
Yes.
Okay.
Rich, grab a chair.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Dover Select Board meeting to order on Wednesday, July 15th, 2026 at 6 p.m. And I'll turn this meeting over to Patrick.
Welcome. Also at 6 p.m. I'll call the meeting of the Dover Municipal Water Task Force to order. Thank you everyone who has connected or come tonight. Just to give everyone a little context tonight, this is intended to be a question and answer session and a discussion about any points or concerns that anyone may have with regard to the feasibility study that was prepared by a Dufresne Group and delivered to the community back in March. No decisions and no votes will be taken or made tonight. This is answer questions and help everyone become more well-informed and let our community make a good decision about proceeding forward. For the most part, we'll turn this over to Chrissy to answer questions. But I think if you would like, Chrissy, if it works for you, what I like to do is maybe jump to the conclusions and recommendations and from your report, walk through those a little bit, and then that'll serve as a context for the discussions to come thereafter. Is that good with you?
That sounds great.
Great. Okay. So let me go through this. The town of Dover is experiencing documented water supply challenges, including widespread reliance on individual private wells, known well interference, confirmed PFAS contamination in multiple public wells. These conditions demonstrate both water quality and water quantity vulnerabilities that present long-term public health, reliability, and planning concerns, continued dependence on fragmented, privately owned wells and water systems, limits coordinated source protection, restricts fire protection capability, and constrains the town's ability to manage growth and economic development in a sustainable manner. The priority scenarios identified in the Dufresne report are structured to address these needs through construction of shared transmission and distribution mains. In addition, there are non-construction tools that are discussed, such as water conservation initiatives, source water protection measures, land use planning strategies, and expanded monitoring and data collection for non-public and public non-community wells. These tools can be used concurrently with project development to begin protecting existing and future water supplies and collect data on potential contamination and water quantity issues. As discussed in the report, a consolidated municipal water system would provide substantial long-term benefits compared to continued reliance on private wells and fragmented systems. Centralized infrastructure improves public health protection through consistent regulatory oversight, coordinated source management, and professional operation while reducing risks associated with well interference and PFAS contamination. It also enhances overall water supply reliability by allowing sustainable withdrawal planning, redundancy, and better management of peak seasonal water demand. In addition, a municipal system improves fire protection and public safety through hydrant coverage and available fire flow, which private wells cannot provide. It further supports managed growth and economic vitality by offering predictable infrastructure to serve residential and limited commercial areas, allowing the town to align future development with community planning objectives. Collectively, these benefits position a municipal system as a long-term investment in public health, resilience, and sustainable community development. The specific recommendations of this report include the following. First, advancing a municipal water system to address identified needs utilizing a mainline construction approach with users paying for individual service connections. Second, refine the scope of the service area and phasing through further community engagement, focusing on community priorities and level of support within the community. Third, provide financial transparency early in the process by initiating clear discussions regarding capital cost allocation, funding opportunities, debt financing, potential fee structures, and anticipated user rates. This will allow the community to understand implications and participate meaningfully in the decision-making process. Fourth, implement non-construction tools to protect existing and future water supplies and better understand the extent of PFAS contamination. Collectively, these recommendations support a measured, transparent, and technically defensible path forward that addresses current deficiencies while positioning the town for long-term water supply reliability and economic vitality. Okay, so that's framing this up. I'm going to share one other thing that I noticed when I went back through the report. For the sake of information, I take away, while there is a lot of discussion about water quality concerns, including iron, manganese, radon, bacteria, and PFAS that have been detected in wells in town. Notably, we have about 1,400 private water wells in town, which is an increase of about 200 wells over the last 15 years. Of those wells, 104 were drilled deeper wells, presumably to respond to issues in terms of water availability, and 76 other owners have had to hydrofracture wells to address water availability. So those are some background things. I think, Randy, you wanted to make a comment?
I just wanted to let people know that if you haven't read the full study, it's on the town website. What Patrick just read from is also there. You can go back and read it.
Yep. Yes. So unless anyone has any questions for me before we start, I'd like to turn it over to Chrissy as the guiding force behind the report. Over to you.
I don't specifically have anything to say, but I'm happy to answer questions.
So what other towns the size of Dover in Vermont a town-based water system?
In terms of size, what's the population here?
1,200 or so full-time, plus 3,200 or 3,300 homes, if you will. So we have kind of that resort community structure where we have a lot of second homeowners.
So in terms of kind of connections, probably towns like Chester, Manchester. I mean, Reedsboro has a water system. They're much smaller. Yeah. So they have a water system. Shaftesbury has a small water system. Wilmington. Yeah.
Wilmington.
Killington is putting in a water system.
Killington is installing one currently.
When you say small, is that doesn't service the whole town, just services part of the town?
Most of the town, most municipal systems don't service everybody in town. Most of them do serve a specific area of town, usually the downtown village area, maybe the outskirts of that. Manchester, I know that one very well. They service the entire downtown area and then some areas around that, residential areas around that. But they don't serve the entire extent of the town. And small is obviously a relative term. If you ask the EPA, every water system in Vermont is small, even Burlington's.
Definition. Can I add one thing, and what you outlined as potential options for a system where we decide to proceed with the system, there are different footprint coverages that, range from just the Mount Snow base area to an expanded base area to the Route 100 corridor. There are several different options. I think 4 options in the report you outlined. East Dover was considered a separate option. You did not make a recommendation that we proceed with considering East Dover system at this point. Is that correct?
No, there wasn't, in the community outreach, there wasn't as much support for an East Dover system. And the cost per user was going to be quite high, just because of how spread out things are.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I read some of the report, I didn't read all of it. But if we really decide to put a water system, where are the options that we're looking at? Where would it be located?
So primarily, so the areas that we looked at in West Dover were, we called it the base area. So surrounding Mount Snow, so Mount Snow itself, and then the areas, the residential areas around that. So it was basically Handle Road over to Route 100. And then like I think it was Upper Highland down to Tanner, actually down to like Bears Crossing.
So that would be the service area, but where would the treatment facility go to service that?
So we don't know, because we don't have sources yet. So that's kind of the next step if the town decides to proceed, would be to start looking for sources. We identified some areas and we also identified some existing public water supplies that could be considered. But it's likely that a larger system would have multiple sources. And so at each source, there would be a small treatment building.
And each source could be smaller?
Yes.
Oh,
Like a little pump building.
okay. That would go to a main system or something?
And then it would all feed into a distribution system.
And
Oh, and then,
To answer the question, Killington is 3/4 of the way through building their water system, and they have very similar population to Dover, both weekend and weekday.
so then other areas, we had the base area, we had, the Route 100 corridor. Those were the two main areas that we were looking at. So we had, I think, a base area, which stopped at which went as far south as Handle Road. The base plus area went all the way down to Bears Crossing. And then the Route 100 corridor was from Tannery to, Dorfich.
Joe,
Can I just answer to the Killington water system? The water system Killington is putting in is also piggybacking on a large expansion up at the base area. That those developers came to Killington to put together, the town voted on to be able to do that. We don't have anything like that. So we can compare Killington because they did need the water system, but they also are doing it for a certain purpose within also helping out all the other users in that town. It's long enough clarification.
Many of the existing wells in Killington were contaminated with PFAS. So that was another big push to do it.
So I understand that a lot of private wells probably wouldn't be affected by this. Unless they're in those areas that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's unlikely that it's not effective cost-wise to extend out to the furthest extents of the town. So the more rural areas, the further apart, further away areas probably wouldn't be connected. It is possible that the system could grow from what we've defined over time. But a lot of these systems, all of these towns, maybe let's take Killington out, but the other towns, they all started much smaller and then they just grow over time as needed.
well, and the footprint options that you've identified or the service area options, it's, if you think of it this way, there really are an infinite number of options of where you draw the lines and put and go. We had to kind of say, well, we need something to react to, something to think about. Let's do what we think we can say, hey, that makes good sense if we were going to do it. And then that allows us to kind of at least have something tangible to measure against as we think about it. It's very possible that we could move, that the system service area could change by, oh, we want to include that street, or we don't need to cover that area, or whatever. There's nothing set in stone about the system service area that as it is now. It's just, we needed a straw man to react to and have to consider in a report.
So what I've read in this report, it's really good, it's really thorough, I think it's pretty whole thing, but it's totally great.
That's okay.
What are the plans and when do you start putting this more out to the public, and when does it go to a vote that the town would want to do this? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like right now, this is all planning, it's all great, there's good reasons to do it. Probably a lot of people have a lot of good reasons not to do it, but just covering the fire and possible economic development, you know, the two of those good things. But when you put it to the voters and when do people decide?
To your first question is when do we go, but we're trying to be very open and transparent. It would have been nice if there were more people here tonight. That's a little disappointing. But I think that we keep going with communicating things like this and engaging with people in the community. If you'll notice in the report, the timelines that were discussed are like 10-year timelines because it takes that amount of time.
Once, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you know when to bring it to a vote to the town?
It ends up being, as I think, and I'm going to point to Ashley because I think she said this in our last meeting. She's one of the people up there. She's waiting. I believe, Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong. I think ultimately it's when we go to a bond vote or a financing vote where we have to consider start spending money. That's the real, where we have to take on indebtedness. That's the trigger, I believe. Ashley, did I state that correctly?
So I couldn't clearly hear the entirety of the question, but I think the gist of it.
Can I repeat the question?
Please.
I believe she had I'm going to take just the one part of your question. What her question was when would we get to the point where we would have the town would vote whether or not to do this and take this on?
So I think there are kind of two steps in the vote to take this on, right? There's what you all are discussing now are we gonna go to the next step to like turn this report into sort of like boots on the ground, like actually go after take the next step, right? And that next step, I don't know if the town is planning to put that to widespread vote or if that's going to be a vote of the select board to move forward. Certainly, when the public at large legally would need to weigh in is when when the town is looking to secure long-term financing for the project. And that can look like a lot of different things. That can be, actually going under going through source exploration, because that's a high dollar value endeavor. But in order to secure funding or financing for those steps, it would require a vote of the voters. So that's when, yes, it would go out to everybody in town. But presumably there's going to need to be a decision before that quote unquote vote of the voter authorization to incur debt to move forward, because you're not going to look to incur debt tomorrow. There's work that needs to be done before you get to that step.
Okay, thank you, Ashley.
And may I add?
Go ahead, please.
And Ashley, feel free to correct me if needed. In the early phases of the project, the town would likely be pursuing planning loans. Of course, grants if available, but planning loans are available through the state. And planning loans do not require a bond vote.
Correct.
So that might be an opportunity where the town wants to have a vote, even though it's not required by the funding. But the town may want to go to the public and say, do you want us to pursue this? Because it does incur debt, but it doesn't actually require a bond vote yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting nuance of the drinking water SRF program, where if the community is pursuing planning or design funds and I don't remember the exact language, but it's in Title 24. It basically says that the community does not have to get voter authorization, like a vote of the voters through Australian ballot, to incur planning funds, as long as those planning funds are going to be incorporated into long-term debt. Now, that doesn't mean that the loan is applied for in some like backroom secret, super secret bat cave operation. the loan does need to be applying for the loan does need to be authorized at a duly warned public meeting. So it is still in the public's sphere. It's just not necessarily, there's no requirement that the voters vote positively to apply for a planning loan in the DWSRF program.
Okay, great.
I
And one
know
of,
these
one
are
of-
like nuances and like legalese, but certainly to Chrissy's point is the community could say, we want to make sure that we have full support. And so we will do a vote of the voters. I'm not saying that they are or should or can't, but they can.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. I think one other thing I'll add, just to come back to the communication part of your question. In addition to communicating with the residents and the people who live here, the residents and the voters, I think we need to continue to communicate to encourage information of the second homeowners and the condo owners, because they're part of this process too. They may not have a vote, but they certainly have input and they have some decisions that they will have to make at some point. So they need to be informed as well.
Not having a lot of people show up here, but we get more people more informed. So that when you do want.
Keep working at it.
Automatically say, I ain't doing that, my taxes are going up, you know?
Yeah.
If they know the value of it, like.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Well, that's one of the things I went through in Killington. And they actually started the initial round of planning in 1999. It took them to the bond vote in 2023 to actually get it to the point where it was approved by the voters. But there's a lot that went on in there, including a couple of developers that kind of didn't earn the trust of the community. And Patrick said it, maybe Christian, we don't have a developer we're working with. This is strictly for the community that's here around. So it's a little different scenario, but it's going to take years before it ever comes to a bond vote.
Okay, other questions or comments or concerns, including from people up here? Jim, go ahead.
If you back up the properties in the condo associations and you back out the commercial properties, how many individual standalone properties are within that map?
I do not have that number off the top of my head. We would have to go back to the raw data and land uses, basically the grand list data to identify that.
So, for the individual wells like Kim's and other people in your first main area you were talking about, the base area at Dump Snow and then along the road. If that's gonna be, let's just say that that's one of the areas where the treatment facility would service, would the people with individual wells be able to opt out of accepting service, or would they have to automatically?
That would be a decision for the town to make as moving through the process. Do you want to require people? Does the town want to require people to connect or not require? So it's a town by town. There's no state requirement either way.
Can I come back to Jim to your question? I would suspect, without giving you hard numbers, that the overwhelming connections, individual connections in the footprint area are condos, condo complexes, and commercial. As I think about the base areas, there's not a huge number of single family standalone homes in that area. I don't think. I would think, and I put this out to everyone else, I think that ultimately for this to work, we have to have enough connections to justify. If you look in the model, there actually is a range of proposed connections of 50% to 90% of the people in the footprint. And what that does is, in terms of the estimated monthly operating expense and the bill that people would receive who are part of the system. So I think ultimately part of the go, no go decision really involves looking to say, we need to get we would need to get as many connections as we need to actually make it reasonable for those people who are connected. Otherwise, it's just too expensive, right? hopefully that answers your question indirectly, Jim.
The answer, you don't know.
Yeah, the answer is we don't know, but we need connections.
We don't know
Right.
now.
We don't know
It
now.
is a calculable number. We just
Right.
haven't done the calculation.
So how do we get to know that? Don't know it now, but yet we're talking about planning for a potential system. So how do we get to that number? Not necessarily right this minute, but you know what I mean, to be able to answer that.
Well, there's public records we could use to go through that. Yeah. That's not a hard number to do. It was beyond the scope of what we were asking her to do, because the reality, as I said, this starts to get into the infinite permutations. If you'd like, I can say, well, I'm only going to count 10 houses on that side of the street and 2 on that. And now I've all of a sudden, I've blown up everything, because now, okay, we want 200 or we want 100. You can make your head explode. It's infinite. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just as to put some lens on this, I know that there will be an inflection point of where you need a go, no go. But Chrissy, I don't know if you remember, and you might not have been involved in Waitsfield, but Waitsfield was a new water system. I mean, I might be aging myself, but 10 to 15 years ago, and they had a no go sort of inflection point. They reached that inflection point, and then as the lines were going in, people were like, "Can I connect? Can I connect?" So it's a type of situation where people may not necessarily be on board at the onset, but when the rubber meets the road and the digging things are there out front of their house, they're like, actually, I do want to connect. But obviously it's in people's best interest and there was incentives put out for people to sign up early to get those commitments so they could secure the funding and they could move forward. So just know that this is something that's happened with other communities in the past, and that no go threshold, and trying to get like an actual number of like, well, what's my water bill going to be? That's going to be a kind of an impossibility until the water starts flowing.
And we had the same thing happen in Londonderry. So Londonderry just started construction 3 weeks ago on their new wastewater system. And we had multiple stages where we sent out letters saying, okay, are you interested? You're not committing. Are you interested? And we got people responding back. And then throughout that process, some people said, well, you know what? I'm not interested anymore. And that's okay. And then we said that the next one was, okay, now you need to commit. We need to know for sure if you're going to connect. And we got enough people wanting to connect. And then of course, when construction started, we got more people calling saying, can I connect?
And were they able to?
Well, we just started 3 weeks ago. So in those cases, we have a phased approach in Londonderry. So in those cases, they're not currently permitted. So we can't connect them in phase 1, but they can be considered for phase 2.
So once to join in, they have to all be permitted.
So water and wastewater are a little bit different. So in the wastewater, we have to have them specifically permitted to change their wastewater supply. And we did that through our whole, like a single permit for the whole project. I'm not sure exactly, maybe Ashley has more information how it would happen on the water side, but every time anybody who owns any property changes their water or wastewater supply, or their water supply or their wastewater disposal, you are required by the state to get a permit for that. And so that is part of the process. If we're going to change your water supply from a drilled well to a community system, there would be a permit that goes along with it. So I don't know if they would handle that as more of a collective permit like they did on wastewater side, or if it'd be individual, but we would have.
I imagine there would still need to be a WW permit for each individual connection outside of the initial project. However, and Chrissy, this is probably more, again, in your side from a technical standpoint of a design, is knowing how many people, so the I'm saying we like I'm an engineer. We can do estimates of peak and average day demand based on assumptions, but at some point those assumptions become reality based on the number of people who connect, and so or commit to connect. And just like the wastewater systems, it's entirely dependent on flow, and so having a better idea of who's gonna, like, I'm just saying that if too many people like raise their hand that weren't planning to connect, that may affect design flows, design standards. So that's why getting in early and making those commitments is really it's a benefit to the community.
And that's one thing that's happening in Londonderry. We have a very specific capacity in Londonderry, and it's not huge. So if we had 20 people who said, I want to connect, we can't connect them all. And so we had incentives in Londonderry to get people on board earlier.
Beforehand. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Hold on, Joe, Jim had raised his hand. He was waiting. Yeah.
I don't listen to Joe.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
So these projects that you're talking about right now, is there any state, federal funding, grant money that they're gonna receive while they're doing these projects?
So Londonderry is currently ongoing. Londonderry has, for this particular project, they have 4.6 million in ARPA funding. And then the rest is being covered by a Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. I think it's just over $1 million in the loan.
Oh, the interest rate.
Oh, for the interest rate on that is 2%.
All right, Jim.
The numbers that were projected for this project are really staggering for a small town. And I'm seeing to think that these might be today's numbers, not looking ahead to 20 years.
Yeah.
You factor everything in. And if you think they're staggering now, then probably knock you down 20 years from now. And, you know, for 1,400 voters in town, you know, it's gonna be a tough road to hoe, I believe. I could be wrong about this. But what concerns me a little about this is I felt somewhat along in condo associations and commercial interests, you know, developers have the most to gain by this rather than the individual property owner in town. Although all the property owners in town will be on the hook for this. And there are some failing water systems within those condo developments. The condo developments have access to the same pool of money that the town proposes to access. The money costs slightly more, but it's there. Certainly the condos can rectify their own problem without a investment of 65 million from the town.
Is there a question or is that just a comment?
Well, I guess to phrase it as a question, isn't that a better alternative? And to let the 1,400 condo units perhaps address their problems in a cheaper manner than placing a burden on the town.
Okay, I'm gonna go, Chrissy, if you want to respond first, Steve, I'm sure you have an opinion on this topic, so.
So, so one of your comments was that the property owners would be on the hook for part of the cost as well. That's a decision for the town to make as to who pays for it. So does everybody in town pay for it, or do the users pay for it? Most systems, the users pay for. I think I only know of one water system in Vermont where everybody in town pays, even if they're not connected. Most of them are users paying for it, including the capital cost. any debt service. And then the other comment was that condos have this access to the same pool of money as the town does. That is not necessarily true. Condos do not have access to a lot of the special federal funds that come out, like ARPA funds. Like back in 2008, it was ERA funds. They do not have access to any of that. They don't have access, they don't have the same kind of access to the SRF program. There's a much larger pool of money for the municipalities at lower rates and potential subsidies forgiveness, which the condos don't have any. They have higher rates and no subsidies or forgiveness.
Steve, go ahead. I think you were.
Hi, everyone. So we represent 900. And we currently have no issues with our water systems or our sewer systems, and of course that could change at any given time. We have plenty of access to money and cash, but we reserve all of our places. We reserve for treatment, we reserve for sewer injector pumps, well pumps, all that. I passed along some information to Ken Westwood. I don't know that he shared it with the task force in the past, but we reached out to our well company, which is Glen Well. And it seems like this is an issue that it's twofold. One, of course, there's always a fire protection issue where we're trying to get more water to locations for better fire protection. But then there's the water side of the equation, which tends to be split up into whether it's a sanitation issue or it's a lack of water issue. And I want to know if the task force would consider, with the small amount of people that are having issues with this, could go to the economic development funds, which there's lots of money in the town of Dover's economic development fund, and borrow the money to take care of their necessary repairs at their location. So Lynn Wells said to take care of a sanitation issue, which is PFAS or whatever, you can install a system within your own single family house for $8,500, right? If someone has to go in and dig a deeper well or a fracking situation on their well, they could probably potentially spend about $20,000. So if you take the number of residences that are having a problem and maybe throw in some condominiums, but I represent most of the large condominiums or all the large condominiums, the money is much smaller than what's being laid out here on a town by town, by town-wide basis. And in towns like Stamford, Connecticut, you basically lend the money to people, let them make the repairs and then pay it back over 20 years or 15 years or 10 years to, if they're having money issues or need money or whatever. So I just challenge the task board to see if that's something that they would consider. And I know currently the select board doesn't have the broad powers to be able to lend money that way, but it certainly could be put on the agenda for a vote to enhance your authority to be able to lend far and wide in the town, because there's so much money in that fund. I don't know, it's $3.5 million. Last time I talked to Marco Tomini about it, but we'll leave that for the select board meeting in a little while. But I think that we're going down a path where there's going to be a lot of money to be spent on these types of systems or even in engineering. And I know my group of condos, which represent the majority of the connections, are not at this point looking in that direction to do that.
Okay. Other comments or questions, Tabby?
There's another side to this, which is most likely not visible to people like condo associations, to a lot of individuals. But without a municipal water system of some sort, it does not specifically go to size or who is serviced, but that cuts us out of many state funding programs, development programs. There are a lot of restrictions that are written such that we cannot do X or B in program Y without a municipal wastewater system and a municipal water system. It's not the one or the other. I've been to quite a few meetings to say, hey, this is not the way our town was laid out. So that is something to consider as we look towards the overall future of the town. Whether or not the size will encompass, does it need to encompass all the condos? Does it need to encompass the commercial strip? That may be something that can weigh into on this, but looking at the various programs that I see and where we can do development or will have the ability to develop and build some more things out. I think it would benefit the town to have something so that when the state is allocating funds, they can say, yes, we have a system. They are not saying how big it needs to be. So something like that would be helpful, I think, on both sides.
I understand.
Okay,
that totally.
Steve, we can't have a cross discussion in the meeting. I'm sorry. Let me go around and I'll come back and you.
Sure.
Cindy, I think you were raising your hand before, or
Costs being for the users. That makes sense to me, like the whole implementation would, all the total costs would go to the users and not the homeowners that weren't hooked up to the system. Did I hear that correctly?
That's a town decision to make. The state's not gonna tell you how to do it. The town can decide how to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a lot of money. I reviewed the report. I didn't read it in detail, but I looked at the whole thing, and I'm in that base area, so I'm very interested in this. I mean, this is a lot of money.
Mhm.
So over the years, this will be tax increases. Will this be borne equally between residents and second homeowners? Like, how's this going to be paid for?
well, I think ultimately it's a question of if we get to the point that we say, hey, we want to do this, that all goes into the model of who's connected, where it's connected, and what decisions we make about who pays for it and how they pay for it.
Well,
There's nothing is determined in this report. Yeah.
Benefits from having better water for
Yeah,
residents.
Exactly.
Right.
So those people, those homes that aren't connected, if they don't pay, they get that benefit. I mean, that seems.
that's a discussion we can have as a town when we get to that phase. We're really not to that phase. It's a great point.
Yeah.
And I think it's a discussion that we would have with primary homeowners and the second homeowners as well. There's a lot to discuss.
So in it looked like the feasibility study the studies would continue for out at least 5 more years before anything could be done.
Yeah,
I saw that on the page. Now, where does all that money come from?
There's, if we were to go to the next level, there's a discussion about some data collection and testing. I think the difference between what I understand from the report and what I think you said, Steve, is that we actually don't have adequate data knowing about water quality across the town. We have a few points. There were not that many points. Was it 10 or 15 points
For,
in the report where PFAS was detected?
yeah, because it's only public water systems that are being tested.
Right. So one of the things that I think, I'm putting words in your mouth, so you have to correct me if I'm wrong here. So, one of the things that they've recommended is we do more testing to understand the scope of what our issue may be. We may find that we don't have as much of an issue as we think, or we may find we have a bigger issue than we realize. Just because you don't exceed levels in one place today doesn't mean 2 years from now it doesn't change. I think that's what you've recommended is a data collection program to allow us to thoughtfully consider this, because it is a big expense. Yes.
The funding for that, the whole town bears the brunt of that, the funding for further studies.
I have to look at our select board chair and ask her how that would work if we were to do that. It
Yeah.
could be funding from the DWSRF.
Mhm. We haven't really explored, we've heard ideas of funding, but not really specifically explored certain ones. But there is funding out there, and it would probably be town or economic development money, I would say.
And I will note on that, the studies are covered under planning loans. And planning loans are, when a planning loan is issued by the state, the town doesn't have to pay it back for 5 years. And if after 5 years, the project is not moving forward, the town has to pay it back in 5 years, over the next 5 years. It's 0% interest. If the project is moving forward, then these just continue to roll over until you get to construction, and then it goes into the construction loan and gets paid back as part of that. So it's not that that the taxes are going to be paying for the studies initially. It'll be likely planning loans, or other grants.
And in terms of your cost estimates, you actually put a substantial contingency in there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
40%.
Joe, I think you were, yeah,
So,
and then I'll come back to you.
a little rounding back to Mr. Montello here. So you're trying to say that if your condo association, say Seasons, comes up with a really big PFAS problem in their wells, that you can just treat it and the state's not gonna test you, not gonna drill wells all around to see where it comes from or any of that? Are you sure about that?
Currently, there's no regulations or requirements that the state is going to ask.
Well, let me just back up on that. Our public water system here,
Uh-huh,
right here,
right,
that we have, that is the same.
we
I-
test for PFAS.
You let me finish right now. The PFAS that we had here, okay? We had to test all the surrounding wells. We had to do quite a bit of stuff. And by the time we have a new well right there, it's probably about $250,000. Okay, so I assume, because, now I'm not guaranteeing that if you come up with a PFAS problem, your association, and ours was not that big. That the state's gonna require you to do this testing, to do all this other stuff, and it's gonna be quite costly. And you may not be able to find a water source. Okay, so when you throw numbers around, make sure you have correct information for your associations, so. That's all I have to say.
All right, pause,
Knowledge
pause.
of what the regulations are.
Okay, pause. Steve, go ahead, because you were
Well, I
up
don't
next
want this to
anyway.
be an
No,
argument.
no, go ahead.
No, but.
No, but you were up.
I mean,
Hold on. Steve, you were up next, then I'm gonna go. You were next. I'm going to these guys after you, so go ahead. I don't want to have it cross that.
Test for PFAS at all of our associations, depending upon whether it's been detectable or not. If it's detectable under 4 milligrams by federal regulations, they're requiring you to test every year, twice a year. Now, if you are not detectable, they're requiring you to test every 3 years. So all of our associations are below the federal and state requirements at this point. Not to say, moving forward, that they don't escalate those PFAS numbers. But if the numbers are large, they're certainly spread across a lot of condominiums. As an example, if we have to spend $250,000 at Seasons, as Joe pointed out, it cost you here at the town, that's only $1,000 a unit. It's not $20,000 a unit, which could be the potential capital cost if you're doing a public water system. So our systems are completely operating right now under current regulations. There are testing schedules in place that are overseen by the state of Vermont. In fact, Seasons got hit with a high pH number, so we have to add soda ash to our system, which is only going to cost $5,000 to add soda ash to our system. So there's nothing, on a grand scheme of things that's going to add a lot of expenses to our condominium associations. Now, I want to talk about the economic development. Right now, as you know, the Regional Planning Commission, the Planning Commission came to North Branch Fire District, so the sewer branch has plenty of capacity. So that's not an issue anywhere in Dover that is currently in the North Branch Fire District. Water systems are obviously an issue with development. Snowvita dropped their bedroom count to 3 bedrooms per unit instead of 4 because they couldn't get the water count. But they're moving ahead with 32 condos. Boulder Ridge is going to move ahead with their condos once they come out of bankruptcy and get their shit together, right? So development is happening. It may not be happening in the commercial zone downtown. And I'm not a scholar of the funds available at the state of Vermont for economic development that Tabby's talking about. I'm not an expert there, but I know that economic development is not being curtailed right now because there's no water supply, to my knowledge. So there may be information that you guys have that says someone was going to put in 20 units here and they couldn't because the lack of water. It's not lack of sewer, it could be lack of water. So that was my response.
Okay, thanks. Ken.
I want to make specific comment and propose something. Because a comment on who pays for the initial cost.
I'm sorry, Ken, could you speak up? I'm having a hard time
When
hearing.
North Branch issued their bond issuance back in 2016, 2017, whatever it was. That cost was passed on only to users. However, it could have been passed along to everyone in the North Branch district. So that option would be available under a water system also, where the capital cost, the operating cost would be users. But the capital cost could, at the discretion of voters or select board, be passed either to users or to everyone in town. That option's available, as Chief Waller said that. The proposal, I would say, is that perhaps as we move forward on this, we should have those secondary numbers that Stephen's talking about. What it would cost to, correct problems, any potential problems amongst all of the users that are going to be within the district that we're talking about, from Highlands down to Town Hall, whatever that is. And estimate it out, because we do have those, and like Steve said, there are people who do this for a living that can take care of the plastics in the water for $8,500 a unit. You can take care of other issues. All those are definable numbers. They're actually pretty easy to get. I think I was there when Steve called one of the drilling companies. Well, I also Googled it and got the same number. So I'm just saying that we should have that accumulation numbers also side by side, so we can see what it is that how much are we paying beyond our ability to correct current problems or future problems. How much more are we paying for the water system?
I think there's a lot of good discussion here and food for thought, for sure. I think one way to look at the money so you don't choke on it is what we do now with the town, with roads and capital and equipment. Every year, the voters are asked to put a certain amount of money aside to future fund, whether it's a new bulldozer or a new fire truck, or there's a capital plan every year for roads that we put money into in a reserve fund. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with our water for our community? So that's one way to look at it. It doesn't change the cost, but it does change how you look at it. And I keep coming back to fire protection in the commercial district. We have none right now. So that always has to be front and center when we talk about this stuff. And maybe what Taddy says is right. We do a small district there. That's one of the options. It's one of the more costly options because it doesn't have the base to spread the costs around, but that's one way we can look at it. So again, there's a lot of food for thought here, and I think everybody's had some great input tonight.
Cindy.
So I've already said it, but it just seems to me like if everyone benefits from increased fire protection and everyone benefits from economic development, then everyone's a user. In a sense, right?
you
Everyone's
can
a
look
user.
at that. Sure.
Chrissy.
I just want to throw out one thing. So some towns do charge people who are not connected to the system. And they call it maybe an assessment fee. It's usually based on the assessed value of your property. And it's actually not just people not connected, it's people who are connected also. It's usually an area that's defined either by a fire district limit or one town I know does it by if you're within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant, you get charged this fee. They wanted to call it a fire protection fee, but they felt that was too mobbish. So they called it an assessment fee. But it's because if your property is located within 1,000 feet of a hydrant, it helps your insurance costs. So you do benefit from that hydrant being there. And it's a way to get those folks to also contribute to the system. So there are some systems that do that and some that don't. It's just another thing that the town can choose to do There's a lot of different rate structures that the town can come up with.
Chrissy, can I ask you, we went in a big gap between the last time you spoke and a lot of people had some things. Is there anything that you wanted to clarify or confirm or respond to? I just want to make sure we didn't.
No, I try to let you know when I do.
Okay, okay, anybody else over here? Alan,
I have a couple of things. First is that the way that capital expenditure is funded by users is hookup fee usually. No, correct? But usually that initial fee is usually funds the CapEx portion.
It can, I guess in a newer system, it can, in an older system, like some of these systems that have been around for a while, it creates, some of them use it to create a fund to fund future replacements, so future capital costs. So yes, I guess.
But I understand that, like, we've got quite a bit of latitude to create a funding system. So say the hookup fee and other fees when you first hook up go somewhere, your monthly users fee, so, is another portion. The people who live in the district and potential assessment against their property is another portion, and the whole town is another portion. These are all the different groups that can pay different amounts of the total capital expenditures on this thing. And maintenance and running and so on and so forth. So there is quite a lot of creativity, and the more you guys come and talk to us about it, the more we incorporate that into the plan. That's number one. Number two is, I'm an attorney. I represent over the course of my life a bunch of different residential developers. I know that the first thing on the due diligence list when we used to send out the brokers is public sewer and water. Because yes, there are developers who are going to go through it if they have to build wells and they have to build septic. But it's a different level of development, right? Because big developers very rarely want to deal with uncertainty. They don't care what the cost is to hook up, as long as they know they can hook up. They know they're not going to dig 200 feet, realize they got to dig another 200 feet or bring in a fracking rig or worry about PFAS or any of these other things. It's the reliability that brings in the big developers. Okay, that's in my personal experience. That's all. And then the third thing is that something that I saw in Colorado where I lived is that this was in Golden is that the areas that were not served by the sewer by the public water, when the first house had to drill deep because they got dry, it wasn't very long before the next house had to drill deep too, and the next one down, the next one down, the next one down, the next one down. Because each time someone digs deeper, that water's got to come from somewhere. So that's sort of the idea behind when you do have failures, even if we only have 20 or 30 failures, I don't know what the number is over the past 5 years. When you do have wells going dry, you know what's happening in aquifers all over the place. They're not replenishing the way they should be, because we're using it. So, I sort of see this as only a matter of time. That's it.
Randy?
A couple things. One, to Alan's point about big developers, that's exactly what finally kickstarted the Killington project. Is they have a developer who wants to redevelop the Snow Shed and Ram's Head base areas, and included in that is up to 1,500 housing units. And they weren't going to do it without the municipal water system going. So to Alan's point, that's exactly right. Another thing to think about, you're going to hate me for this. When you think about everybody paying for something that not everybody uses and everybody gets it every year on their property tax bill, is the education side of your property taxes. And I'm looking around the room, and some of you have kids in the schools. A lot of us don't at this point, but we're all still paying for it every year. So it's, however it ends up being sliced, whether it is or not, we're all paying for stuff we're not taking advantage of, or at least not directly taking advantage of.
Are there any other questions? Because we are hitting the 7 o'clock hour. I want to be respectful of time. Yeah.
The water in Manchester does not taste good. The water doesn't taste good. I'm sorry. How are we gonna, prevent that from happening? Having to fluoridate, it's just the water, it does not taste good. So that's just throwing that out there.
I do have to say that Manchester at the which one was it? The Vermont Rural Water Association Conference this year won best tasting water.
Oh,
I guess your flavor is subjective. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, it is now 7 o'clock. May I ask a member of the Water Task Force to move?
Second,
And a second, we stand adjourned to the Select Board.
I
you
make
need-
a motion, the select board adjourns.
Yeah.
Second,
Joe seconded.
sure. The Dover Select Board is
adjourn.
adjourned at 7 p.m.
Thank you, everyone. This is great discussion.
I didn't want to say anything, but weren't you told?